In the modern world, we treat freedom as the ultimate baseline of human existence. We believe that liberty is a fundamental right, an unalienable law of nature, and that any system which suppresses it is inherently evil. But this belief is a luxury. It is a psychological privilege bought and paid for by a world that is safe, stable, and fundamentally indifferent to our thoughts. In the universe of Warhammer 40,000, that luxury has been violently repossessed. When we look at the unimaginable tyranny of the Imperium of Man, the thought police, the mass executions, the complete obliteration of personal agency, our instinct is to condemn it as pure, sadistic malice. But the truth of the grimdark is far more terrifying than simple malice. The truth is mathematics. The truth is physics. Today we are going to deconstruct the anatomy of liberty to understand why the very concept of freedom is not just discouraged in the 41st millennium. It is a lethal, apocalyptic vulnerability. Welcome to the Huckrift. To understand the death of freedom, we must first look at the most dangerous weapon in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, an open mind. In our reality, an open mind is the cradle of progress. It allows for debate, philosophy, and the evolution of culture. But in the 41st millennium, the rules of physics are completely different. The immaterium, the warp, is a dimension of pure, predatory psychic energy that constantly presses against the fabric of reality, waiting for a crack to slip through. And the human mind is the easiest crack to exploit. In the lore of 40k, an open mind is literally described as a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded. When a citizen practices freedom of thought, when they question the dogma, when they entertain forbidden ideas, or when they simply wonder what lies beyond the stars, they create a psychic resonance. They draw the attention of the ruinous powers. Freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of philosophical inquiry. In the Imperium, these are not political crimes. They are breaches of quarantine. If a single factory worker starts preaching a new liberating philosophy, they might accidentally form a cult. That cult generates emotional energy. That energy thins the veil between realities. And suddenly, a hive city of billions is being consumed by a demonic incursion, all because one man wanted the freedom to think differently. In a universe where thoughts can literally manifest flesh-eating demons, ignorance is not just bliss. Ignorance is body armor. Beyond the spiritual threat, there is the crushing logistical reality of the survival machine. Freedom requires agency, the ability to choose where you live, what you do, and how you spend your life. But the Imperium is fighting a war of attrition on a million fronts against infinite enemies. The scale of this conflict fundamentally breaks the mathematics of individual agency. Imagine a machine that requires 1 trillion gears to function. If even one gear decides it wants to be a pendulum instead, the machine stalls. The Imperium cannot afford the inefficiency of choice. If you are born in a manufactorum, you will die in that manufactorum, because the Imperial war machine calculated 10,000 years ago that it needs exactly 80 billion workers on your planet to produce enough artillery shells to hold the Cadian Gate. If humanity were granted the freedom to choose their professions, who would willingly choose to shovel radioactive waste in the engine bowels of a macro cruiser? Who would volunteer to march into the jaws of a tyrannid swarm with a flashlight and a bayonet? Freedom creates a deficit of suffering, and the Imperium runs entirely on the currency of suffering. To grant a human the right to self-determination is to steal a resource from the Emperor. You are not a citizen, you are a biological component. And components do not get to vote on where they are installed. This brings us to the Inquisition and the complete eradication of tolerance. The modern philosopher Karl Popper proposed the paradox of tolerance, stating that if a society is tolerant without limit, Its ability to be tolerant will eventually be seized or destroyed by the intolerant. The Imperium of Man took this paradox and weaponized it to the absolute extreme. The Imperium understands that tolerance is a contagion. If you tolerate a minor deviation in the genetic code, you eventually get an unstoppable mutant uprising. If you tolerate a mild trade agreement with the Tau Empire, you introduce the concept of the greater good into the minds of your citizens, which will inevitably lead to planetary secession. The Inquisition does not burn heretics simply because they are cruel. They burn them because they are operating on a policy of absolute zero risk. If a doctor discovers a Xenos technology that could cure a plague, the Inquisition will execute the doctor and burn his research. Because while the cure might save 1 billion lives today, the Xenos logic embedded in that technology might corrupt a sector and cost 1 trillion lives tomorrow. Freedom of innovation is a variable, and the Imperium survives strictly by eliminating variables. Tolerance is a crack in the dam, and when the ocean outside is made of pure madness, you seal the crack with human blood. But what if a planet decides they have had enough? What if a planetary governor successfully rebels, overthrows the Adeptus Arbites, and declares their world a free, independent human republic? This has happened thousands of times in Imperial history, and it almost always ends in the exact same horrifying way. The moment a planet declares freedom, it severs its connection to the Astronomicon and the vast logistical network of the Imperium. They are now alone in the dark. For a brief, shining moment, they have liberty, they have democracy, they have peace, and then the Orc War arrives, or the Drukhari slavers drop out of the webway. Without the massive, brutal retaliation of the Space Marines and the endless meat grinder of the Imperial Guard to protect them, the free world is butchered in a matter of days. The cruelest joke of the Warhammer 40,000 universe is that the galaxy hates freedom even more than the Imperium does. The Imperium is a tyrant, but it is a tyrant that holds a shield. If you throw away the shield to escape the tyrant, you are instantly eaten by the wolves. Independence is not a political status, it is a suicide note. We mourn the loss of freedom in the 41st Millennium because we view it through the lens of a species that believes it has a future. We believe that history is a long arc, bending towards justice. But humanity in Warhammer 40,000 does not have a future. They are a terminal patient, clinging to life support. When a patient is dying of an aggressive cancer, they do not have the freedom to eat what they want, to go where they want, or to live how they want. Their entire existence is reduced to the brutal, painful regimen of chemotherapy. The Imperium is the chemotherapy of the human race. It is toxic, it is agonizing, it is slowly killing the patient, but it is the only thing keeping the cancer of chaos and Xenos annihilation at bay. Humanity did not misplace its freedom. They traded it. They walked into the darkest era of galactic history, looked at the absolute certainty of their own extinction, and made a transaction. They sold their liberty, their joy, their individuality, and their souls, all to buy one single miserable commodity: time. Freedom cannot exist in the 41st Millennium because freedom is soft, and the universe only respects the hard, jagged edges of survival. The Imperium is a prison, but it is a prison built to keep the monsters out, not just to keep the inmates in. The next time you look at the towering, oppressive Gothic architecture of a hive city, or watch 1 million faceless soldiers march into the dark, do not ask why they aren't fighting for their freedom. Ask yourself, what kind of universe makes freedom the most dangerous concept in existence? If this descent into the philosophy of the grimdark resonated with you, leave a like and subscribe to the Huck Rift. Let me know in the comments. If you were transported into the Imperium today, would you choose the dangerous, brief spark of rebellion or the long, miserable safety of obedience? Until next time, the Emperor protects.